Okay, it looks like we're live, everybody. Oh, and just so you know, sometimes Dot, you'll see maybe my camera lag or this or that, the other. That's more of a back end thing, is to make sure that everything's going down the front end correctly. So the video to you and I sometimes hangs up. But all right. Uh, let me get a chat open. Hello, everybody. I am, as you can possibly see from the camera, I am doing a new setup tonight and got some new things going. I don't have the intro video, or rather, not video, the intro music ready to go. So that'll be put in after the fact. So I'm just going to jump right into it. Tonight, we're going to be awesome together with Dot Cannon of Two Maverix, who I've known what feels like a very long time in a good way, the best way possible. But first, I want to say, Tyra is out this evening. She is still teaching her class, changing the world one brain at a time, helping people learn. I think this is even an advanced honors class she's teaching about social media and streaming and that kind of thing. So she'll be out for another week next week, and then everything will be back together. And we worked with Dot's camera early on, and it didn't quite work, but we really need to hear her more than we need to see her, because none of us like to lip read on a podcast. So, Dot, how are you doing this evening?
I'm doing fine, Charles. How are you?
I am great. So you have twomaverics.com, but you don't call your podcast Two Maverix.
No, I have a small business called Two Maverix Multimedia out of Long Beach, California, and my podcast called Over Coffee, which has the feeling of a San Francisco coffee shop or coffee house, actually, is one of my main products.
Yeah, it's pretty awesome. Now, you've been doing that since before we met, if I remember correctly.
Absolutely. I started the show in 2010 as a radio show. And then I wound up thinking, well, this podcasting thing sounds interesting. And my background is in radio. So I believe I would have to double check, but I believe I posted my first episode in 2013. I currently have 453 episodes.
Okay. Well, that's a good, that's good rookie numbers. We'll work on those numbers. We'll get them up. It's good. Rookie. So you and I were warming up, catching up a little bit behind the scenes. And I believe you're correct. We met, I know it was at one of the either New Media Expo when they did just their own expo, which was kind of the middle to late summer. And then the very next year, they did it in January with NAB, the National Association of Broadcasters in Vegas. And I want to say they did one more after that, and then they were done around 2017 or so. But yeah, so you came from radio. Were you used to going to conferences? Was that how you got your word out about your show and met new people, or what was going on back then?
It's one of the ways. I went to NAB for the first time as I started to get into broadcasting, and I was utterly wowed. That was a very long time ago. I still have the program for that NAB conference called Democracy and Broadcasting the Winning Ticket, or something like that. That was a long time ago, so long ago that then President Ronald Reagan spoke, and he had been a broadcaster, and he was spectacular. He got 4 standing ovations, and I didn't agree with him on a lot of things. I am not a Republican. So that was kind of interesting. But getting off the track here, I had gone to broadcasting school for radio before we had the Telecommunications Act of 1996. And I was a radio professional for 21 years. I still consider myself a radio professional. But then this podcasting thing came out. And I heard a few people at New Media Expo and later at Podcast Movement talk about, I'm doing this, I'm getting all these sponsors, I'm making all this money. I thought, I can do that. I can create radio. 15 years later, please note.
You're still working it, and I love it. You actually got some nominations for podcast awards.
I have gotten a few of those for the People's Choice. Now, that and $50 will buy me a cup of coffee with today's inflation. But yeah, I was pretty proud of that. It's People's Choice in the arts category because my podcast is about creativity at the intersection of art and science. Now, I am the last person in the world you would ever think would be doing a podcast about science, technology, engineering, or math. But the arts are what I'm interested in. And I do this as an arts person's approach to those four. What does that mean for creativity? I have a pretty good time telling the stories of innovation with my guests, looking at the different resources. I gear this mainly towards teachers and also to makers.
Yeah, I was looking at your site today. I had Chat GPT run your site so we could get a nice little write up for the podcast, which I thought it did a fantastic job at that. But you actually on your site you were talking in one of the latest podcasts. You were talking about robotics and AI, and I'm like, man, that is such a dichotomy of where you came from with the arts and radio. That what has you why here on Be Awesome Together we talk about everything, whatever makes us awesome, right? Whatever makes us excited, and it sounds like it's what you're doing with your show. You said you started back in what 76 or sometime around then about with radio. It has changed so much. So let's talk about that. What is some of the biggest changes you've seen from when you started in radio to when you started in podcasting to what you're doing today?
The most fun ones have been the change to digital because you almost had that right. Only 10 years. I started in 86 as a radio
Sorry.
person. That's perfectly fine. And it was so long ago that we recorded a half-inch tape, or not half-inch, we recorded quarter-inch tape. Half-inch was for the big recording studios. Quarter-inch tape was radio. We would have these
Okay.
massive behemoth reel-to-reels on which you recorded anything. And state of the art was where you had two tracks. When one of those came into our broadcasting school, everybody wanted the studio that had the two track because you could do one track that had your voice and the other you could do a mix down and have your music and your sound effects. Well, today, come on, what have we got? 16 tracks at the very minimum in a free applications. That has been the
Yeah.
best change as far as I'm concerned, as has been the fact that now with technology, you can go just about anywhere and get guests. I have talked to people in Europe, Africa, Asia. It used to be when I first started the podcast, it had to be they've got to be in the US because I have to record them on the phone. But now, not so much. If you can stand getting up at 3 in the morning sometimes because of the time difference,
Right.
you're going to have a lot of fun guests. And I really think the digital change was the most fun because I recall when I first started on the air, we got this new technology called Fast Edit, which was the precursor of today's Adobe Audition and Audacity. Do
Okay.
you know Fast Edit, Charles?
It's vaguely familiar. I don't think I mess with it too much.
Mm. Well, I began learning it because my boss brought it in, and it was really fun because I'm more of a visual person than anything else. You asked me how did I go from being an arts person to doing science, technology, engineering, art, and
Right.
math, and the answer is broadcasting. Because when you think about it, broadcasting is the ultimate STEAM pursuit. You've got how do I do a good show? How do I hit the mark? How do I hit the actually do the talk up is what I'm trying to say here. But also, you're going to have to read your tower. You're going to have to count backwards, back time, so that you know what time to start the news. You've got all the different
Mm.
disciplines right in there and the technology. Suddenly it made a difference. And that's the whole focus of STEAM, I think, is that it's all about what does this mean in my world? When you and I were in school, I'm sure you had some subjects that, oh, what does this have to do with me?
Right.
For me, those subjects were science and math. Well, science and math have a lot to do with design. And I just interviewed someone who's doing the Science and Tech Festival in Las Vegas. And we talked a lot about what are the applications for arts people. I always find that intriguing. And when you come to audio production, I did a lot of crafts when I was a teenager. Well, audio production is just doing crafts, but with sound. You're going to be working with music and sound effects in your voice now instead of beads, yarn, wool, whatever you may have
Sure.
used.
Yeah.
So that really is the approach for me. That is the arts approach to STEM.
I like it, and there's been well, I want to say there was a move to add A in there for STEAM, right?
Mhm.
Science, technology, engineering, arts, and math is what I had seen at one point. That was a movement. I'm not sure if that movement really integrated itself there, but I man, yeah, growing up, I remember that's the biggest joke, right? You won't have calculators in your pocket. Of course, we
Mhm.
carry calculators in our pocket on our phones all the time now. But it was always, what does this have to do with anything? And a lot of school can just be teaching you to become a worker in society. But I always gravitated to the ones that challenged me to think bigger, to see bigger, and then figure out how it connected into the everyday life. And you're going from radio. I got to play in some radio studios, very little when I was coming up through podcasting. Most of mine was always recorded through computers and whatnot. By the time I really started dabbling in it, but seeing the decks, seeing those clocks, there's a skill that I do wish I had learned earlier. So I did learn it eventually through having chats go crazy on the side and tracking it while always trying to stay on point. I thought that's what you're talking about, watching the clock tick down, leading into the song or leading into the commercial or changing things up. So let me ask you that then. What's one of the uh uh skills that you still use today that you first learned in your early days of radio?
Interviewing is absolutely the skill that I learned in my early days of radio because we did a late night interview show. I am an introvert, as are many people that are in radio. And the first time I had to interview somebody came to the studio, I thought, oh my gosh, I'm going to throw up. I'm not going to be able to talk to this person. And I was scared half to death for the whole first 30 seconds. Then he started telling his story and playing his music. And by the time we were done with an hour interview, all I could think was, when can I do the next one? It's
Nice.
something that I never thought I would enjoy interviewing. I never thought I would enjoy public speaking. Radio has done that.
So you said something earlier about the talk up, and then now you're talking about the joy of public speaking. There's so many people who love to say they hate the sound of their own voice, right? And our producer, our beloved producer, Cause, is here in the back channels with us tonight. And before I got her on, at the time it's called Behind the Track, and I was highlighting the volunteers, what she volunteers with us at DragonCon, and she's like, no, no, I sound horrible. I'm not trying to make her feel bad, but there was a resistance. I don't remember exactly what it was, but part of it was I don't like how I sound. I don't feel comfortable, those kind of things. But then she did it. She stepped up. And then the biggest thing I really loved about her stepping up was afterwards, she was like, well, that was not nearly as bad as I thought it was going to be. I'm like, see, there you go. It's fun. It's cool. And you don't in my opinion, I want to see where you land on this, Dot. In my opinion, you don't have to be a public speaker. You just have to enjoy talking to people, right? It's like, well, I'm not a great interviewer. You don't have to be. Who would be one of the greatest interviewers? Maybe Barbara Walters. You don't have to be her. You just have to like talking to people and hearing their stories. Is that something you would talk about and expand on?
I would absolutely agree with that. It's all about the stories, and it's all about the story only that person can tell you. I'll hear people when they first start out, so what time's your concert? Or something like that. But what they want to know
Yeah,
really, any
yeah.
musician can answer that one. But why did that musician become a musician? What did they think when they're on
Yeah.
stage? How did they write that song? What came to them? There's the fascinating part, and it took me forever to learn this too as an interviewer. Anybody's listening, if they do the other kind of interview, don't feel bad. But the interesting part is, what is the story behind? And it's really about listening to people. It's not difficult once you research, and the person just about interviews themselves 9 times out of 10.
100% agree there. And I, funny enough, is whenever I prep people for interviews, I also do a intermittent show called One EMS The Assessment, and it's for my charity, One EMS Unified. And I try to talk to people in the world of pre-hospital and anybody serving fire and EMS, EMTs, paramedics, those kind of things. And I get doctors and I get different people from all walks of life on that show, but I always have to prep it with my interview style is the storytelling. I want to know what brought you to this thing that we're going to be talking about. I'm going to be recording one next week about a new business program, the first one in Georgia at a state college that's designed 100% to manage an ambulance company. Right, that's never been a degree. It's never been official classes, at least as a full program in Georgia. Well, we're going to talk about that. 'Cause obviously, you are excited, Doc, about that. But I want to know what brought you to this path, because I think the story is what sells the product. And you were talking about you have this media company and you do these things. Is that where your success has been? Is in that finding those stories and sharing them with the world?
I think so. And that depends on how you define success. Anybody that looks at money would say, I haven't been successful, just like 99.9% of other podcasters. I don't make money at this. But to me, the success is when somebody wants to hear their interview again, or when we reach out and it means something to someone. I had a listener recently say, I'm sending this to my son. The technology that you used is something he's going to listen to. He's going to learn this.
Yeah.
That to me is success. Sharing the stories, and stories are going to stay with us. We've yet to have a kid, I think, in the history of time that say, tell me a fact when you put them to bed. They're always going to tell me a story. And we're all that kid.
Yeah. I have found myself signing up for a class or buying a product because somebody told a great story that I really resonated with who they were or what drove them, or just that transparency of how they think. I understood the mindset behind the product. So that's the fun stuff. Tell me a story, Dot. Tell me of where you got shut down, where somebody tried to shoehorn you in to, no, you got to do it this way. And what did you do about it?
In the course of my podcasting career or otherwise?
You all of it, anywhere you want to go, whatever story came to mind.
Okay, the first thing that comes to mind is that I use writing as a tool to get where I want to go. From the time I was a little kid, everybody said, she's going to be a writer. You should write. Write. The only problem is I really don't like writing. I can do it halfway decently. Someone said, and I wish I knew whom because I would attribute it. I don't know who said it, but someone said that a writer is someone for whom writing is more difficult than the rest of the population. And that is true. I have spent my whole life trying not to write a book. And I finally realized that writing is not my goal. It was my family's goal for me, but I used writing to get into radio because I like public speaking. To my astonishment, I didn't realize I would. And I like radio and I like creating things and inspiring people if I can.
I love it. I've always said one of my missions in life is to help others be awesome, and that inspiring people is what feeds me. Right? It's I've made some money doing podcasting. I've definitely at least opened doors and moved my path forward because of the shows I've done. But I would dare say you've been successful too, not necessarily from your shows, but the skills you've learned. Right? Instead of me saying, let me ask, have you, outside of podcasting, radio, and media, found success in finding jobs and connecting with people because of the skills that you've learned and developed through your media?
Connecting with people, I've absolutely been a success. And I can't say that I look to find jobs because this is my full-time job. I work for myself at Two Maverix Multimedia. So I kind of can't answer, have I been successful in finding jobs? Now, if
Well,
anybody's looking for,
clients, right? Your income, something, right?
yeah, if anybody's looking for a digital public speaker or virtual, I may be available. I'm doing a couple projects right now. How's that for a shameless plug?
Nice.
But,
There you
and I
go.
also published a course that I created last year. And that's something I had a lot of fun doing. But I cannot say that I have found jobs through it. I've made connections that have been amazing, though.
And how many people who do what we do can say I work for myself,
You
right?
know,
It's
hmm, not that many. Radio people, ever since the Telecommunications Act of 1996, I know a lot of radio people who are now doing something else that isn't radio and wishing they were back in it.
yeah, and when you do, well, it depends on your show, I'm sure, but when you do work in radio, depending on how you set it up, you work for the station and at the whim of the station. And I've been in Atlanta or in the Atlanta radio waves where I could hear them for a long time. And I have followed shows and I've seen them go away. I've seen new hosts come. But what I've really seen the most is stations almost overnight changing formats. Whatever they were doing, the rock edgy station just wasn't working. And now it's going to jazz or country or something else. And it just, that's the nature of the beast. That's the nature of the business. And when that happens, you either change if you can with the time, but if it's a talk show, if you're a host, right, you're the talent, you're the when I say this kind of talent, I'm talking about like morning shows, the personalities. That's the word I'm looking for. The personalities. Yeah, they're DJs that can lead into a rock song as much as they can lead into a country song. But I am talking about the ones that build up that brand. I mean, if they go from edgy, comedy to light listening. The movie Airheads, by the way, everybody go look up Airheads. I know Dot and I came through the era of that movie, but
Yeah,
that's kind of the thing, right? Behind the scenes in Airheads, one of the things where they were changing to they're going from rock station to easy listening or whatever. We have a question from the audience. I'm gonna pop it up here on the screen. This is from oh my god, Benji. Benji says, my father worked in radio for decades before he taught media and communications at Alabama. The one constant he said was that talk is always cheap.
that is so true, Benji. And the other thing they tell us in broadcasting school, your dad probably heard this too. The first lecture we had, the instructor said, "You will get fired." And half the
Oh,
room was looking around and saying, "What? I've never been fired." But yes, and for no fault of your own, just what you said, Charles. Format change, boom, suddenly everybody's out.
yeah, yeah. You say something wrong, you make the wrong joke at the wrong time, and while you didn't violate FCC rules, the major advertiser on the channel on the station doesn't like what you said. That can lead to problems. Have you gone through any of those? Have you gone through station changes or something out of your power that just like, this is ridiculous, but it smacked you in one way or the other?
Well, yes, I have. I was working for an incredible small market radio station when I first started. I would still be there if we hadn't had the Telecommunications Act of 1996, but the whole station got closed down. They were part of a larger chain, and the larger company took them over and changed format, just like you said. And 20 people were suddenly out of business, including me. So I was fortunate I got to go on and got some other radio jobs, but I really wanted to stay back on the air. And when that didn't happen, because I'm in LA, I'm competing with a lot of other people who had a lot more experience than I finally just thought, well, I'm just going to have to go live with a podcast or something else. And that's ultimately what happened. By the way, that happened twice because Telecommunications Act of 1996 happened. The station for which I worked closed. Then I went to another small station and they got sold for, at that point in time, sounded like an incredible amount of money. And once again, everybody was out.
Mm.
So crazy
So, okay,
radio.
you've referenced, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I said crazy radio. I like to say it has all the stability of a soap bubble, but the bug bites you and that's it.
All the stability of a soap bubble. That I get that. Now you've referenced this Telecommunications Act of 1996. In a nutshell, why is that the what do they call it in archaeology when it's like you can tell the eras? Why is that the era marking the end of the era, beginning of a new era moment?
Well, that allows, prior to the Telecommunications Act of 1996, an owner could only have a certain number of stations. in order to encourage competition. I
Okay.
believe, was it WNBC in New York? There was a station when they first came out that were the red and the blue network. And I'm sorry, my radio history is failing my memory right now, but they had to sell the blue network that became WNBC just because there was this law. You can't have two radio networks. Well, Telecommunications Act of 1996 did away with that law. Today, you can have as
Uh,
many radio stations as you want, which meant small markets were suddenly going away. There suddenly wasn't as much opportunity, and the big conglomerates. Today, we've got, let's see, Emis, Cumulus,
yep.
Salem. I'm trying to think of what all the other ones are. iHeart, of course. I'm probably missing a couple here. But if you're in radio today, you better have some other skills too, because the big ones will do voice tracking now. They'll have one announcer cut tracks and
Mm.
it goes through all the different stations. Whereas it used to be everybody's independent, they have their own announcers.
Yeah, that's crazy. It makes sense, but it's. I mean, on one hand, radio is not a big margin, you know, business, right? Yeah, you have some big hitters if you get lucky. You get syndication, you know, if you get lucky. I know the local show here is the Burt Show, and they talk about being in some other markets. Hey, thanks for the subscription there. Our station one, I believe, is what popped up there. I don't know if you heard that, but I heard a notification I saw pop on the screen. I love that. So cool. Uh, but you, you only get radio only makes the money in advertising, right? And in selling spots. That's something I learned later in life. Is I could have started on radio if I wanted to buy a 30-minute spot on the local radio network at midnight or 1 a.m. or something like that. I had no idea. I thought everybody in the radio had proven themselves somehow in their talent and in their creativity, but that's not always the case.
No, it certainly isn't. I've even seen that with major markets. People come in, I'll buy this slot, and it's an amazing amount of money. I wish I had the exact figure, and I haven't. But a lot of times, some of the hosts will have bought that slot, and then they bring in their advertisers. And depending on the reach, it can get pretty pricey, but it can also work out. It's kind of like throwing the dice. It may or may not work out. The other thing is the model for radio, and Benji's going to hear this from his father too, in all probability, is that the model is they're going to advertise something. And if I were going to say, listen to Be Awesome Together, and you bought a spot on a radio show, I would
Right.
have to repeat that 30 some times, at least according to what they used to tell us, in order for anybody to buy a product or respond. And that model has always sounded a little strange to me.
Yeah. Yeah, that's the Nickelback of advertising. Is I am a fan of Nickelback. I like the music, but I can even I get why in the 90s it became that thing of it became a fact, and they the band brought it up in an interview and said, look, we've never asked for this, we never wanted this, but there was a point in time where there was never a Nickelback song not playing somewhere, because it said their song that was the hit at the time, or they had two that were in the range of hits at the time, they each were like 3 to 4 minute long songs, but the study showed, or whatever, however we get feedback on these songs, right, it showed that a Nickelback song was playing every 2.5 minutes. So with the song's 4 minutes and a song playing every, it's just you. And sure enough, I mean, I couldn't change the radio at certain points without hearing different parts of the same song on every station. So that was not that. Nobody wants such exposure that you get oversaturated and you get turned off. And that's the same way with advertising. Is if I buy a spot on your show, Dot, I want it to be meaningful. I want you to use your clout and whatever you've built with your audience to say that this is what I stand behind, and this is, and you know when that is. So I imagine you've had to read, because in commercial world, nobody believes that you know what you're doing. It seems like, anyway, you have to earn that right. But it's they when they buy, it's like you have to read the ad this way, and you have to do it at this many times. I used to do ads on my podcast through an agency, and that's how it came down. It was like, you have to read it exactly this way. You got to read it by this time in your show, no later than this. I'm like, but it doesn't fit. So I do a show called Wise and Nerdy right now, and it's literally chaos. It's controlled chaos. We have 6 segments. We roll the dice. One of the segments is a commercial break. Sometimes it rolls up at the beginning of the show. Sometimes it rolls up at the end. You never know, because we literally roll dice to see what next segment we're going to do. People love that. Let's play with it. But if you told me I had to read your ad by the 5-minute mark of the show, it's like, well, I have to turn down that ad because I can't, it doesn't fit with the format. And secondly, you, in my opinion, are more of a professional at this than I am. I have bumbled my way through all of this. So when I say professional, like you, I'm sure you've been trained on radio how to read certain things. I hate reading out loud. I'll do it. I read Benji's, but I'm reading when I'm reading it. I'd rather an ad, if I'm going to do it, be like, okay, let me get the bullet points. Let me see what I love about it. Hey, I got my Deadpool cup here. You know what I love about Deadpool is this, he makes me laugh. He's just got the jokes. I love the artwork. And you can see Deadpool 3 in the theaters this weekend. Deadpool and Wolverine, whatever. Let me be natural with it. But not, would you have any advice to give to people who are looking to do ads in their shows, like sell spots, how to maybe read naturally, how to negotiate the ability, like myself, to say, I don't give me a paragraph to read. Let me have bullet points. What advice would you give in that world?
Well, first of all, I think you're a little better qualified for this than I, because I have never run ads in the show. And if I ever do monetize, I think what I'll be doing is selling product. I do courses. So I think that's what I do, simply because it's jarring when people start listening to your show and all of a sudden it's, hey, buy this product. But the other thing is, if you are going to be running something in your show, just like you said, Charles, be creative with it, give your audience some fun, bring something in about it. And it has to be something that you wholeheartedly endorse. If I were to sell anything at all, it would have to be something I use on a regular basis. The coffee I drink, the computer I'm working with,
Right.
the clothes I wear, anything of that nature, because I can't tell you, you've got to use this because it's wonderful, when I've never seen it before in my life. You will call me out. You will hear the phoniness.
Yeah. It's like when you earn an ad, right? Because there's some networks you can join that with certain qualifications, even as a smaller show, you can get ads. I know it used to be Anchor, but now it's Spotify has, I don't know what their number is, and it's a lot higher than it used to be on Anchor, but they have certain numbers that you can qualify as a smaller show. Blueberry Podcast, if you host there, I think some of the others out there, if you sign up for their hosting and or ad program, you can get ad shares. So that's not earning it, right? That's kind of like how I do stocks. I just buy pieces. I don't buy full stocks. So that's kind of getting in at a lower level. And I get that not everybody is me and you, and not everybody can just riff and have it be real. So you in advertisers, like, we're going to give it to 1,000 different shows, and we're not going to vet every last show. So you just have to do it this way. I can see the pros and cons of that, but at the same time, if the content qualifies, why are you so afraid of it? If somebody gets on and I'm looking at this Apache case. It's a knockoff of a Pelican case, right? Pelican is the name brand cases. Apache is the Harbor Freight, literally the Harbor Freight version, or I don't know if they make it, but it's the cheaper version, does the same thing. But if I sit here and I go, hey, I use this Apache case and I love it, and I sound awkward saying it, okay, who cares? Now, if I call it a Pelican and not an Apache, yeah, you care. But in reality, did it hurt your brand? I don't know. I'm getting off on a tangent here that gets me a little bit. The lack of trust in what we do is irritating. And when I talk about earning it, right, you've built an audience. I don't know what the number is today. It used to be like 15,000 downloads per episode was like the marker, the watermark that advertiser would seek you out. Now it's probably higher, but advertisers seek you out, brand deals, those kind of things. Okay, you've earned it. Why are you still telling me how I have to say it? And I can't tell you how many times I've watched a YouTube video or turned on a podcast, and they start, and you tell the energy's there, and they start doing the thing, and then they go into the pre-read ad that's there. It's like, you just killed the whole moment. I don't understand that.
Exactly. The only thing I think I would ever do, even if I had a sponsor, would be we're sponsored by XXX today or something like that. And by the way, if there is a
Yeah.
company called XXS, I apologize to you because I don't know of one. I made that up. But I don't know that I'd never do that just because that's me. That is what works for me. Somebody else could be different.
Yeah, I listened to the Tony and Ryan podcast out of Australia, and they started off as radio personalities. Best I can tell, because I only discovered them through the podcast, so I didn't follow them before that. But the best I can tell is they built up their clout and their personalities on radio big enough to where they made some kind of celebrity status, and then really got smart about what they were doing and did it for themselves. And they own their own company that manages this podcast. They work for themselves. They build this podcast. They do it 5 days a week, and they do it their way. And they have BetterHelp is an app out there that they advertise for, and you can tell they're very smart in their negotiations, because I listen to another podcast called Small Town Murders. Your night and day shows here. Tony and Ryan are very positive and very real about how they talk about things, and very funny. Where Small Town Murder, while still comedy, shows true crime and murder, but you could tell that the Small Town Murder one is a read ad. Like, they read the ad, they do fine with it, and it's not horrible, but you can tell it's an ad. Tony and Ryan do it like it's their podcast. And now, well, it is pre-recorded, and they just put it into the break wherever the break is. But sometimes it's hard to tell that they didn't just shift into a transitional bit, and now they're talking about BetterHelp. And that's all I'm talking about with these ads. Is I love it. I love how they do their ads, and they're phenomenal people. And I missed when they came to the US, but that's neither here nor there. All right, Benji puts back in here thoughts on the old Carnation Milk Burns and Allen method, where the ad is a subplot. That was fun back in those days. What do you think, Dot?
Tell me a little bit more about this, because I don't know. Where the ad is a subplot, where it's in the actual content. Is that what you mean, Benji?
Yes. Yeah. So they're like doing a bit, right? And it's just their standard, oh, here's another bit. And the jokes are all about like in this case, Carnation Milk, and how they worked it in. And if I remember correctly, it wasn't like full on blunt. Like part of the joke in Wayne's World, the movie Wayne's World, was they were mocking how the corporate sponsors wanted them to shill, and he'd go, just like I'm drinking this diet, I would never shill Diet Pepsi, the choice of a new generation, you know. And they were in on the joke, and it's hilarious. It's that kind of thing, except with Wayne's World, it was very over the top and funny. Whereas, yeah, good. Thank you, Benji. But yeah, almost like the product placement, but kind of campy is what Earth Station. What is it? It says Earth Station Boo on it. Is that Jen? Because I know there's Earth Station 1, which would be Faber, I would imagine. But I don't know who Earth Station Boo is. But yeah, it is subtle. It is, you just work it into a natural kind of conversation, but you're doing bits. It's funny.
I like the kind of campy. I like the making it amusing and giving something to the listener or viewer with the ad, but I'm not so sure I would ever do it.
You know, I do like your method. I love what you were saying about if you're doing it, so this show is brought to you. I like call sponsors friends. Right, because you're a friend. I mean, we worked out a deal. You supported what I'm doing that makes you friendly to me. And if I got one for Wise and Airy, we're fathers. We're 3 different level of fathers. We have Kurt, who is a grandfather. There's me, who's in the middle. I have 2 grown kids who are out of high school, and 2 that are in middle school, about to high school. And then Joe has got 3 kids that are all under, I think his oldest is around 11, 12, and the youngest is 3. So, smaller ranges of kids, different walks of life, different views. And if we're going to do something for fathers, right? A Father's Day ad or something, it would be exactly like you're talking about. Of look, this episode of Wise and Nerdy brought to you by our friends, Deadpool. This is the only one I know how I can sponsor without saying this is not a sponsor of the show. Brought to you by the Deadpool mug, because we love Deadpool mug. We drink it. Look, dads, there's nothing better than a giant metal mug that you get on clearance at AMC's. Where I got this from. And you just work it in, and people love it. You're laughing, I'm laughing, and it's like, hey, you're a friend of the show, which makes you a friend of mine. I'm gonna go and buy the Deadpool mug products, those kind of things. Shannon from the horror podcast. Well, hey, Shannon, I like that. Earth Station Boo, that's awesome.
Hi, Shannon.
So let's see. Kevin says sponsorships are intrusive, especially when I'm trying to listen to podcasts. I like to listen to podcasts when I'm eating, and if you're looking for delicious meals delivered to your door, let me.
It's true. It's so true. Sponsorships are intrusive. You're trusting us with 20 minutes of your life. Now, am I going to try to sell you Hello Fresh? No offense to Hello Fresh, but I'm just not going to do that.
But that's like a perfect way I love it. And that's also my humor is I have not worked out any brand deals that were that, all the little bit of sponsorships that I've had have been through agencies or whatever. Like I said, I went through Blueberry at one point. I went through Anchor at one point. So they give you what I loved about the Anchor ads was like, here, we understand that you need to make this natural. It was just to everybody. It wasn't just me, to everybody who got to the program. And they gave you a read if you wanted to do a read, but they gave you bullet points. So I just make sure you hit these bullet points. And it has to be at least 30 seconds long. Well, I'm a talker. So when I got those bullet points, I did an ad for like a minute and a half. But I really believed in the product. It was hosting with Anchor at the time, and they got bought by Spotify. But I was all in on their hosting platform. Technically, I still am. We still go through Spotify, but I loved that. I loved having that freedom. So, all right, we've rambled about ads and stuff, but that was great, Kevin. That was you got me. I mean, I didn't pre-read it. I just put. Oh, there goes my camera. You can still hear me. I'm going to fix it. Hold on. Technology. Apparently, there's a time limit on this thing. All right, there we are, back again. It's going to refresh here in a second. It should refresh here in a second. And yep, back again. Okay. So I love that the audio is separate, so you never lost the audio. I just froze for a second there. All right, Dot. So I want to know why this medium, why you got started in 1986 in radio, what attracted you and your creative artsness to this outlet?
This outlet combines what I can do well, because I can make things, I can tell stories, and I have a halfway adequate voice. So all of that together, I don't think I'm somebody who would have succeeded on television. I have really got a face for radio, quite honestly. And this way, I didn't have to be concerned about that. This way, it was really more comfortable for me to share ideas. People also put together in their minds what they think you look like when they hear you. No radio person ever matches their voice, by the way. I've had people go, oh, you're so-and-so. So that will happen if you're a radio person. But it's just the overall creativity. It's like everything I could do fitted into a notch in doing radio, like it was somehow meant for me.
I love it. I love it. And now that you're doing everything yourself, because presumably, I don't know, I'm assuming, and you know what they say about assuming, but I always thought that you start radio, you have somebody help you out, you have a producer, whatever, running the board and those kind of things. But presumably, you do it all. You book your guests, you give them the contact, you prep them, or however you work that, and you set up your own recording. You do the interview and you do your own recording, then you do your own post-production and publishing.
Absolutely.
So how long or how it sounds like you're if you're born for it. Just honestly, I get it. I get it. I've tried my whole career. One little side note, tried my whole career to put into actionable steps and words something I was born to do. And that's hard to do because when you're born to do it, you can't always explain how you do everything. But how, since you're born to do it, but how did you, was it hard? Was it any kind of difficulty in your path of learning those extra steps as you went along the way to now that you can offer the whole package?
Yes, I have a love-hate relationship with production. It's kind of like what Dorothy Parker said about writing. I hate writing. I love having written. I don't always like doing editing, but I love having produced. Sometimes it is like the broccoli on the plate of my career to get up and do that audio editing, but I will do
Mm,
that because I do enjoy putting together the finished product. I enjoy putting the music together, the different sound bites that tell you about what my guest is going to say, the writing and introing, and the outro. But yeah, that's what I've had to do to make that work well is every day, first thing in the morning when I get up, I edit for 5 minutes on my audio files because that bite
oh,
sizes
nice.
that task and brings it down. Since that's the one task that if I could have AI do it, I would. I don't yet trust AI enough to do that.
Sure.
So I will do it myself. And there is a certain, some mornings I really enjoy it. Some other times I don't care for it all. But I've heard a major name podcaster say there are some days he doesn't even want to go in the studio. So I'm not alone. I think most podcasters aren't.
You know, I am in the phase of my life where I'm decompressing from the last phase of my life, which was beginning of March. I changed into this next step of what I'm doing. And I'd been at a desk for 5 years running a company, a nameless company, and all the stress and all the everything that goes with that, on top of still managing my media, still managing to do Dragon Con and everything that goes into that, and consistently trying to grow my reach into cons. I think in 2024, yeah. Yeah, my goal in 2024 was to do like 24 speaking engagements, and I got like 34, 35, somewhere in there. And they were
Wow.
all, most of those were live, a few of those were digital. And it's just I have to push myself because if I don't, I'm just a dude who works a desk. But all that being said, I mean, of course it exhausted me, it made me tired. And I'm trying to figure out if I'm still decompressing and it just need rest because I let my studio get the shambles. And if you saw it now, it's still kind of dirty. I mean, there's a shop vac I need to clean up and a box fan I need to store and this and that and the other. But it's even just moving a little bit of furniture around. And I'm in my recliner, which I haven't been in years. You know, I've got a new setup which I'm experimenting with and gonna do some more tomorrow night and build that. I'm bringing a couch in. But to get to that point of just cleaning up and going through some boxes and reorganize. I got storage above head, so I'm looking up at the boxes. Just I still need to bring them down and inventory them. It took so much to get there. And the other night, just playing with this is my phone, by the way, that I'm on. Just figuring out how to connect my phone to my computer and doing it that way with no lag. And it was such an overcoming thing to do. I've still got videos to edit that are on my phone that are short. And I was just thinking about that today is I've got to find a routine that helps me get this started in myself in my day. So you said, is it not okay? Is it every morning, Monday through, 7 days a week? Is it Monday through Friday? When you say you get up and you spend 5 minutes in the morning, presumably with your coffee, editing your audio, how's that pattern work for you?
Well, what I do is I trick myself. I can't have my first cup of coffee until I've done 5 minutes of editing. And I want my Java. So,
Yeah.
but I cannot tell you I do that every morning. Some mornings my husband gets up and he has to leave early for work. So I give myself a little grace and I have coffee with him those mornings.
Grace is important. Grace lets you flow. Excuses let you stagnate, but grace lets you flow. And I like that.
Oh, I
Um,
love that. I hadn't heard
it
that
is,
before.
I just kind of made it up. But yeah, I get it because we all struggle with that, right? As creators, we all struggle. I know I do. That's what I mean when I am not expressing it harshly enough when I say the dread and the exhaustion of just thinking about moving my desk into that corner when it was for year 2 3 whatever about 2 years it had been sitting against the wall with the camera behind it and the lights the way they were. And I my daughter came and helped me and she did everything I asked her to, but she didn't need to do a whole lot. But just having that presence there of someone going, hey, are we gonna do something? It helped. And I just moved that desk one day. That's all I did. And then sat down and got more work done. And then I've cleaned up and then I brought this chair in, then I brought my table. That 5 minutes to start your day that you're talking about. Are there days when you don't get to do that? And is that a bad day for you?
There are days I don't get to do that due to other routines around the house or my hubby leaving early and things like that. Or sometimes I just want to do 3D modeling in the mornings. And no, that's not actually a bad day for me. There's a lot going on right now. I've seen technology change in some pretty incredible ways. I've gotten into immersive and starting to learn world building now, a whole other dimension
Wow.
of creativity. And I wouldn't say that's a bad day. I feel as though there aren't enough hours in the day because I do want to continue as a podcaster. I do want to keep the show going. But I also want to do some other things. I happened to discover virtual reality when I covered VRLA in Los Angeles in 2018, of all things, 7 years ago. Phew, time goes so fast. And
Yeah.
at the time, I thought, I want to know more about this. That is something that I enjoy doing. Sometimes in the morning, I get into the headset, and that's not a bad day at all. It's really fun.
I'm honestly, I want to get back to that energy, to back to that level. And I could see as you're talking is relating to the last couple of days when I had this one meeting yesterday, it fired me up for this sales thing I'm working on. And today I had a one-off interview with a student class at Kennesaw State University. They have to do podcasts as their projects. This class that Tyra teaches, they're doing, she teaches different ones, and I lecture at both in the fall and in the spring. And one time each, and for each class. But anyway, they are having to build a website. It's all about marketing, but it's using digital media for marketing. And so I lectured at the class a couple weeks ago, and there's one group that wanted to do an interview show. So I offered to be the guest. So because it's the first podcast they'd ever done. And I said, well, let me be a professional guest for you because I could see, if they pick a random professor who doesn't like their voice, it's just going to be a bad project where they're learning to do things. Anyway, that was today, and I almost forgot about it until I saw it pop up. That forced me into making sure my camera was good enough for that and that they could hear me and I could just connect through their app and do it. We're talking 10, 15 minutes. And I just felt so much better about myself going, oh, all that was 10 minutes. And now I know I've got my camera and I can troubleshoot it. I got my mic, I've got my headphones. I can make this work. But why do we, as creators, why do we put off that 10 minutes when it's the most rewarding 10 minutes of our day?
Well, that's an interesting question. I was wondering, what about that experience? That must have been the most awesome experience, getting to help the young students start doing their first podcast. But I'll answer your question first. I think we put it off because we don't particularly like cleaning. We're not even going to talk about how messy my studio is because I'll start cleaning something and halfway through it's like, okay, tomorrow. The rest is tomorrow. I have editing to do. But tell me about these students. What was that experience like for you?
Oh, it was fun. It was almost like a dad teaching your kid how to ride a bike. Whereas I know to step back and let them do the show, and they didn't ask me any questions beforehand, so I didn't help them set up. And they made rookie mistakes, but their show was, I was the perfect guest because their show is called Book Club. And I actually had to ask them halfway through, like, all right, I know, why is your show called Book Club? Like, have you ever been to a book club? You don't talk about books at a book club. You drink wine and you talk trash and you just talk everything else except about the book. I'm like, That's awesome. But it's, and it really opened me up more to, and that's what we did. They're like, we don't really have a plan. We're just going to talk. So I'm like, all right, I'm going to see where this goes. But they were talkers, and one of them had to leave early. But there were some things they could have learned, but it was fine. It was really cool to practice, not just rambling on my stories. 'Cause I love to talk, I love to tell the stories, I love to get in, but practice getting to that moment, cutting myself off. And with them, I just sat and waited, and they would pick up and something. And while they're both using headphones, neither one of them used good microphone, and they don't know how to check the set. It was on Riverside. They don't know how to check the audio ducking, right? The automatic bring down of the volume. And so there was one young lady, which I was about to say something. She would talk, and because I have the nicer microphone, or whatever, it would just kind of squash her audio down. And I had to say, "Oh, no, you go," because I couldn't hear her and I didn't know she was going to talk. But they were fun, and it was interesting. And at the end of it, the main host, she had said along the lines that you had said, and the other people said, like, man, I didn't think I'd like podcasting. I didn't want to hear my own voice and that, but she was, I really enjoyed it. That was a fun experience, and that's all I was looking for, is to make let them figure out the process. I'm not sure how it's going to get graded and what Tyra is looking for, but knowing that it was a school project versus a Quotey Fingers real show, right? I was like, okay, let me go easy on the stories and see where they go with it. And if you get a chance to do that, Dot, and honestly, Tyra will probably listen back to this and want to reach out and talk to you. Who knows? But you're talking about selling courses. If you can get tied in, even as an adjunct professor or a guest lecturer at some university near you that teaches social media or digital media or marketing or podcasting or anything like that, it is a blast. It is so much fun to do. The first time I went and lectured, and sometimes a lecture, sometimes it's banter. Once it was, here's how you set up a recording and this and that and the other, depending on the class. But I was just going in. It was the art of the story was my theme, and how to keep your own voice in whatever story you tell. Because some of these marketers are going to go and be ad people for your big corporations and or digital marketing. Not talent so much as creating things for the companies. But I was able to talk to them about keeping their voice, even in working for a company like Coca-Cola. And they're all just writing and typing and taking notes. I'm like, I told Tyra, it's all I could do to not go, all right, give me your book. I want to know what I said that you found so inspiring that you wrote down. I'm just here goofing and telling my stories, and y'all are just steadily taking notes. Yeah.
As though there will be a test on it later.
Right. And I was like, it is that inner voice, right? I know I'm awesome, but it helps to see what somebody else takes from you. And unfortunately in my life, I've had enough of that feedback of some quotes or something I did or something, somewhere, somehow a positive feedback of, hey, this touched my life, which, let me tell you, if you're not a creator and you just like listening to the show, give that to your favorite creators. Tell them what they mean to you in your life, even if it's they give you a laugh on the regular basis, even if it's this is where I go to get the news, whatever it is. We need that 100%. And so I have had some of that, but man, when they were like, somebody had a pen and a notebook and was writing notes, some of them like, what did I just say? I don't even remember what I just said, but I want to know what you heard.
That validation is something you can't buy. That's great.
And well, I would hope you get some of that through that digital speaking and the all the speaking. Let's ask you about that. So you kind of alluded to earlier, what types of speaking gigs you get to do?
That has changed since the pandemic. Just as we were starting into the pandemic, I was giving presentations on virtual reality and on the use of science, technology, engineering, art, and math for creatives. And my plan was to go and do in-person speeches. Well, because this pandemic mess happened, now I do all kinds of virtual speeches. I'm looking forward to doing a workshop Well, I'll share it with you here first, if I may. May I do a shameless plug?
Plug
Okay.
away.
I have a course about how to tell a scary story. I'm intending to do a series of storytelling workshops on how to tell a scary story and very possibly on Halloween applications of STEAM in the month of October. So keep an eye on my website for that, and or reach out to me if you want to.
And you know what? We get that set up. I just gotta find it. Oh, it's at the bottom here. Yes. And there's her website right there, twomaverix.com with an X, TWOMAVERIX.com is where you can find that. And I was looking up a photo of you. 'Cause, like I said, we connected in 2015, and it's like, man, I wanted to confirm in my own mind. I was remembering the face of the same person I had talked to, and I found your a picture, and it said, I don't remember the name of the site, but it's basically where you can be hired to be a speaker. It wasn't your site specifically; you were listed on another site. And like, oh, what's this site? And I click on it. It's like hired to be a speaker. Here's some topics or some presentations, and you had 2 or 3, 4 presentations you do. I'm like, oh, I gotta look into this site more. That's pretty awesome.
Thank you. I
So
think you might have been looking at my .canon.com website, which, by the way, I've got to update because I have other presentations now.
nice. So for people who want to change into that part of the world of creativity, how did you go from being behind the microphone doing interviews to selling lessons and speaking literally publicly?
I've never thought I would. As a broadcaster, this is going to sound ridiculous, but I was scared to death of public speaking. However, I was taking some courses at Pasadena City College to upskill my broadcasting. And to get the certificate I wanted, I had to take a public speaking course. And there's this amazing teacher there who, the very first day of class, had everybody stand up and wave their fingers in the air and make this kind of trilling sound. There's an African tribe that does that as a greeting. I'm not going to try to do it because I sound ridiculous and not authentic. But after that, nobody could be shy about getting up to speak. And from then on in, I realized just how much fun public speaking is. I would never have guessed that I was going to try to be a public speaker professionally, but that's exactly what did happen. I wound up giving a presentation to Mensa in Orange County about virtual reality and giving a speech at NAB, courtesy of Jared Easley and his company at Podcast Movement. Yay, Podcast Movement.
Yeah.
That was so nice of them to invite me to do that. And I had the most wonderful time. So now I'm looking at speaking in virtual venues.
I love it. That is really cool. There's always a way. You know, I like to call it the documentary Jurassic Park. I learned about the chaos theory because life always finds a way, right? And that's awesome. You want to hear a funny story about Podcast Movement?
Sure.
There was some kind of meet and greet at one of the new media expos. It's one of those like from 5 to 8. You can we didn't rent the bar, but you can kind of come over to the bar and mingle with other podcasters and connect. And so I'm like, all right, I'll go get a drink because I was broke at the time. So I'm like, I'm gonna buy a drink, and that's all I can afford, and hang out. And you would think, I would hope. It seems like most people when I'm in public, like I love public speaking. I love doing my dance in front of people. I created a one-man game show so I could really do improv comedy with a crowd and just do crowd work while they're playing a game. I love that stuff. But you get me off of the limelight. I don't talk to people very well. I don't start conversations. You talk to me, I'm good. So I'm sitting at this bar, supposed to be mingling and meeting people, just literally sitting and nursing my drink. Was sitting next to Jared and Gary, Podcast Pickle. Can't think of Gary's last name. And then their third partner at the time. And they were coming up with the idea for Podcast Movement right then. They're like the Pixar thing. They're writing it on a napkin. And I tried to cut it because I thought it was a cool idea. I tried to go, I've done podcasting for a long time. And fair enough, it wasn't the right path. They didn't know me from anybody. And I was not included on on starting podcast movement. But it's just a fun story to go. They didn't even have a name for it then. They're like, yeah, we can do this conference, and we can do this and do this and this. And then about 8 months later, you get the announcement of podcast movement. Like, I was at the bar right behind them when they were talking about that. And that's about the only people who care about the story is people who've been there. So yeah, I appreciate you listening to my story.
Wow, how much fun. I never heard that story before.
Yeah, it's exciting. All right. It is time. I also did a very non-professional thing and did not plug in my laptop. So I've been watching the battery click down like a timer for the show. But let's talk again about your website. What are they going to find over at twomaverics.com?
They're going to find my podcast, Over Coffee. They're going to find a few of the blog posts I have done in the past, articles. I have to start writing a few more of them. I hope that I may be writing an article in June about a very exciting immersive free event that's going to be happening. And I will have to put up a little blurb about the classes I'll be doing and hopefully the course that I have on Thinkific right now.
Awesome. Always having all the different ways to do things. Love it. Everybody, you can find Tyra at linktr.ee/Tyra Burton. And she does have her own website, tyraburton.com, where you can find Geek Meet Social and everything else that she's doing there. Tyra and I will be live this weekend at Stellar Fest. We are going to be doing Be Awesome Together Sunday afternoon at 3 p.m. at Stellar Fest. I'll be doing Wise and Nerdy, I believe, is Saturday morning at like 10 a.m. And then Saturday evening, I'm doing Fandom Face Off, and then I'll be on a few other panels. So we'll be at Stellar Fest in Atlanta at Sonesta at Gwinnett Place. So come and find us there. And you can find me. Linktree is RGOP42, right? Rock Out of Podcasting. You can find all of that there. And then, of course, tell a friend, tell a neighbor, tell your worst enemy. Just tell everybody to come listen to Be Awesome Together and join us. Oh, I got to move that around a little bit. There we go. This Linktree/DC Digital Media Track. And we've got not one, not two, but three major guests coming in for our track this year. And I'm very excited about that. Can't quite announce them yet, but we've got some awesome new things happening this year. The track, of course, that is Labor Day weekend every year. And this show is every Wednesday night, 8 p.m. on Twitch, Facebook, and YouTube. And if you just go to that Linktree, you'll find all the links there. Dot, thank you for coming on and reconnecting. And we found each other through LinkedIn, which is very unusual for me. I mean, again, we reconnected through LinkedIn, but it was, I'm glad we did. I'm glad we connected, and I'm glad you made it through the fires in California safely.
Thank you, Charles. It's been a pleasure to talk to you again. I'm so glad we reconnected.
Yeah, it's awesome. And speaking of awesome, everybody go out and be awesome together. We'll see you again next week.